Right, so welcome to Braddock's Reviews and happy Halloween, everybody.
Yes.
The twofer.
The twofer.
Yeah, we had to get that out of the way. Well, we're not getting out of the way.
Also, is there something else you want to get out of the way?
Word to your both.
Yeah, you're acting like I'm just bringing it up out of nowhere. You're like, shit, I've forgotten again. I've forgotten again.
I would have forgot to say that. But yeah, happy Halloween, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed our series of videos. We've been talking about 80s horror films, specific films. But in this one, we're just going to speak broadly about 80s horror because there's so much to cover.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, one of the number one comments would probably be like, oh, we haven't spoken about such and such. You haven't spoken about such and such. It's like, there's far too many horror films in the 80s for us to talk about them all. And to be honest, a lot of them are probably worth their own, independent...
Yeah.
Or I've already had independent retrospectives. Like, for example... the Evil Dead films came out in the 80s, so...
We covered them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They've had their own thing, stuff like Aliens and stuff, but again, they're having their own thing.
There are a lot of films as well that we could have covered, but I think we kind of talked about this a little bit. We were just talking about some of the slightly more obscure ones, so I did like the H.P. Lovecraft ones that were done, and obviously we talked about the Night of the Creeps and the Monster Squad. They were fairly obscure in comparison to other films, but some of the really obvious ones we could have talked about, there was
The Fly.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, some of the Cronenberg stuff. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think Videodrome was definitely the 80s.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And although like I say it was before the 80s, but there was that one I mentioned in the Night of the Creeps review, which was 70s. Shivers. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I need to watch that.
Yeah, it's very kind of gross at parts.
Yeah.
But then again, Cronenberg, so you know what you expect.
Yeah, he's been fairly consistently good over the years as well, from what I've seen. I need to watch more of his films. But yeah, Videodrome, that was James Woods, wasn't it? I think we've got some of his up there. What's the other one that I got? Obviously, I've got The Fly and Scanners as well. That was
Pet Sematary, that was 80s.
Yeah, that was the one with Tasha Yar from Star Trek. That was the character in Star Trek's name. Yeah, that was good. Did you see
my brain's gone completely dead for her actual name, but yeah, Tasha Yar.
Yeah. Yeah, have you seen the remake of that? It came out fairly recently.
No, but I've heard a fair bit about it.
Got it. It's pretty good. You can get them both on 4K. Gremlins. Yeah, that's a good call. That was one, didn't that kind of inspired the first PG-13 rating, I think, as well? That and Temple of Doom. So,
well, that's too scary for people to watch as Temple of Doom.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You got to watch Bread, Knobs and Broomsticks instead.
That's what happened to you on Christmas, wasn't it?
I mean, not that I'm still bitter and holding a grudge.
Tell the story, because it's 80s horror, so it's relevant, I guess.
It's basically one of those films that you sit around and watch on Christmas. I kind of lump it in with things like Star Wars, because that's also something that used to be on over Christmas. And it was something all the family could watch. Theoretically. We all sat around, we're all enjoying Temple of Doom. And my grandma was just like, oh no, it's too scary for him, you got to turn it off. She says while clearly shitting herself because she's scared to watch it.
Yeah.
And I'm there like, no, it's great, leave it on. No, I don't watch Bread, Knobs and Broomsticks.
So it was that which was on the other side. But it was, I would have thought it'd be heavily censored as well. I seem to remember we had it on tape, so it was probably around the same time that was.
Yeah, I mean, it was easy enough to censor, and to be honest, you didn't really notice when you were a kid.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, yeah, you've got some more. Poltergeist, that's one that I recommend, actually. If somebody's saying that they want a genuinely scary film to watch, I'll say Poltergeist, because that one, the first and the second one, very good. The third one, not so much, but it's kind of optional, really.
One of those cursed films that kind of killed off its lead character.
Yeah, and the sister that was in the first one, she got killed as well. I think she was murdered as well.
Yeah, pretty sure it's just coincidence, but it's one of those that have a reputation for being an evil film that's got a lot of fucked up shit around it.
It's really scary, the concepts in it, and also the Jerry Goldsmith score, that alone. I had that on it when I was doing some work the other day as well. I just had it on in the background, and it was kind of creeping me out a little bit. So,
I mean, on two other notes of things we sort of vaguely touched on, kind of when we were vaguely referencing Evil Dead, of course, there's also Maniac Cop, came out in the late 80s, and that was Bruce Campbell. Also, kind of when you mentioned Poltergeist, these films are not on the same level, But The Gate, I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah,
that was the 80s as well.
Stephen Dorff is in that. He was the kid.
Yeah, like a really little kid.
Yeah, he don't look anything like. I could have watched that film and not realised it. He looks like kind of for a kid. He looks kind of like, because normally when they cast kids in that, they're usually sort of like really bonny, aren't they? But he was a pretty weird looking boy, and to think that obviously as he grew up, he was in like Blade, and he's like really sort of like handsome in that. But you wouldn't have thought it was the same guy, but kind of weird. Obviously, we've talked about a few others already. Just going through the list now. You've just gone past one there. Friday the 13th. It was like one a year. I think they released those, didn't they? Not as big a fan of those, but
certainly the 80s was kind of the start of the big kind of slasher trend as well.
Yeah.
Because also the 80s where we got the infamous sleepaway camp, which is only kind of really known for the very last scene where it kind of pans out and you see like the killer's like not a little girl, it's a little boy, basically. So very very controversial nowadays.
Just to be clear, there were slashers before that, because I agree with you, but there are people that are going to say, actually, there were ones in the 70s, and they're going to point out how
Yeah. I'm not saying they started in the 80s. Just it was a thing for the 80s, like Slumber Party Massacre and shit like that.
And then Nightmare on Elm Street as well. I prefer those to the Friday the 13th films. I think because they got a bit more of a sense of humour about them, they seem a little bit more self-aware. The third one of that is really good. The first one and the third one I'd recommend. I mean, watch them all, but the third one is, I think, really where it kind of peaked. And it kind of slowly went downhill after there. But they continued through into the 90s, but obviously the 80s was like the main sort of era for those. What else have you got?
Creepshow. That was the Stephen King and George Romero kind of collaboration.
Yeah, it was like 5 short stories, something like that.
Yeah, it was basically like a callback to the old like horror comics that they kind of grew up with. That was the 80s. Yeah, so Creepshow and Creepshow 2 both came out in the 80s.
Yeah. John Carpenter did a hell of a lot as well. I mean, we could kind of just talk about his, like, do a whole video, really, an entire video on that. Kind of looking on my shelf, like Prince of Darkness. That was really good. I think we talked about it a few years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, again, like, we could have done quite a few on that, but again, we've already covered them in another retrospective, so it'd be a bit redundant to go over them again.
Yeah.
And there was that time that like Buff travelled back to the 80s and made like a film about his interactions with a Topher.
Oh yeah, it was The Stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
Although I'm not sure about it being delicious. I think Buff's misremembering that. I don't think anything that comes out of Topher's bell end is delicious.
Yeah. In fact, we can put a video on. Wait right till the end of this video, and there's going to be a Topher reference on there as well, combined with The Stuff.
But yeah, The Stuff, pretty good film.
Yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a nod to The Blob, but obviously they remade The Blob, I think, in '88 as well. It's another good film as well. For a remake, it was very good.
I must admit that's a film that I've not seen in a very long time. Is the remake of The Blob. So we watched the original
a few months ago.
Yeah,
I watched it about a year ago. It's really good, actually.
Yeah, I was looking on Amazon to get the remake, and there wasn't that many options for it, really. I don't know if it's had like a proper Blu-ray re-release as The Blob.
Looking on my shelves to see where, I don't know where it even is on my shelf, not that many, but I thought I saw it then. Yeah, it's there. It's an Umbrella one. They did a release of it. And Umbrella's a bit like Arrow Video. Arrow have done a lot of really good 80s horror films as well. Some of them aren't maybe necessarily horror, like The Burbs and Elvira and Society. That's a good one. That's a sort of body horror kind of thing.
I mean, certainly they had that kind of like subgenre of like it's kind of horror, but it's also kind of not. It's very kind of
science kind of.
Well, yeah, also kind of like vaguely comedic. Like Gremlins isn't really a scary film, like The Burbs.
Yeah.
Technically, I can see why they go in the horror category, but at the same time, they're not really scary.
Cross genre kind of thing. Critters as well, another good one.
It's also a pretty good time for werewolf movies, as you had The Howling and American Tofu Wolf in London.
Yeah, and there was, what was the other one? Wolfen as well. That wasn't werewolves, but same difference.
Yeah, kind of close enough.
But those three kind of get connected because they came around about the same time, and I think we're talking about Rob Bottin, weren't we, the other day, who did the special effects on The Thing. That was yesterday's video. No, it wasn't. It was today's video, actually. And he did some work on both Wolfen and The Howling as well, so you can see the transformation scene where he's becoming a werewolf. It was The Howling and American Werewolf in London. Sorry, he worked on both. You can see the connections there.
Certainly, like, famous for like the good transformation effects and kind of stuff like that. American Werewolf in London.
Yeah. So you've got a really good one on your list.
Yeah, special effects, Day of the Dead.
Yeah, that is a good film. Yeah, the guts falling out.
Yeah, they like, really like that effect, so we're going to have to do it at least twice.
Yeah, it's like, we've got a really good special effect here. We figured out how to make it look really nasty, so we're just going to keep doing it through the film. Yeah, good film. I really like Day of the Dead. A lot of people think it's kind of like the lesser of the original three. But I would kind of not really know whether to say that or not, because I really like it.
And of course, when we're talking about werewolf films, we've also got to talk about vampire films. So we've had Fright Night.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, really good soundtrack as well. That one. That and Lost Boys as well. Obviously, those two films kind of combine. I think Lost Boys came after Fright Night, and obviously Fright Night had a sequel as well, like a proper sequel. Lost Boys had sequels like decades later, and kind of irrelevant, but Fright Night does actually have a sequel that is kind of relevant. Not as good as the first one. We'll definitely give Fright Night a watch anyway. What else?
Something else we've watched actually fairly recently.
Oh yeah. Pumpkinhead, yeah. Stan Winston directed that. He did the special effects on, well, they're not special effects, the technical stuff on films, did the work on the Terminator, the endoskeleton, all that kind of stuff.
Lance Henriksen doing a pretty believable thing of like a backwoods hillbilly.
Yeah, he was pretty good in that.
Yeah, it's certainly one I'd recommend.
Yeah. What else have we got? We talked about Tremors last year, didn't we? I think.
Yeah.
That was a good one. If I look like I'm not looking at the camera, it's because I'm looking on the shelf.
Yeah, and I'm checking like lists on my phone because there are like literally that many.
Yeah.
Child's Play. Can't forget that.
Not seen that.
You have? Yeah. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I need to give that a watch. Quite a lot of them, isn't there? As well. That was banned. Well, the third one was banned. You couldn't buy it, but you could rent it because of the Jamie Bulger thing. In '93 was that? I think that happened.
Plus Brad Dourif, who's always like creepy motherfucker.
Yeah, he did the voice, didn't he? I think as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's also in it at the start. You see him like as a person before he gets like killed and transferred into the Chucky doll.
Yeah, I'll have to give them a watch.
But yeah, mass respect to that guy because he could just show up to give you an algebra test and you'd still be shitting yourself. Like the guy's just like creepy as fuck. Like even if he's doing the most mundane thing.
Yeah, I agree. He was good in the X-Files as well. There's an episode of that was pretty good. Beyond the Sea. Night of the Comet. I mean,
that is the most 80s film that ever 80s over anything.
Yeah.
Like
that is a good one.
Yeah, I think we both like watched that recently, kind of independently. Because I found it, and then you were like,
yeah, it's Arrow Video did a release of it.
Yeah, I think I got it on like Netflix or Amazon or something. It was like, I know I didn't have to pay to rent it. I was just like, oh shit, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. What else have we got? I'm just kind of going through my...
Also, with the Tasha Yar connection, it's got Chakotay out of Voyager in it as Night of the Comet.
Oh, yeah. What else have we got?
Bad Taste. You know that Peter Jackson one with
one.
It's kind of one of the very gory ones. I kind of put it in a similar vein to The Evil Dead and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the classic line, I kick ass for the Lord.
That was...
Yes. No, I'm fucked up. It was Brain Dead, not Bad Taste.
Which is why we stopped filming for a moment there. We didn't run out of memory space on the camera. Oh, that was what it was.
Yeah. Totally deliberate.
And of course, as you very well know, Brain Dead is a 90s film, so we're not going to talk about that one.
I mean, only just 90s, it's like 92, but yes, we missed that one.
Yeah. So, what else have we got? So you mentioned The Gate. I really like I said, I'm just kind of going through my horror collection. What about Stephen King ones? I don't think we've really mentioned many of those, but I'm thinking...
I mean, Pet Sematary, that was Stephen King, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it feels like there should be more. I think a lot of his stuff really was more 90s. I mean, there was like there was the It film, and that was 90s, so we can't really count that one. But yeah, we talked about him last year. Hellraiser, obviously the first two of those. I think the third one onwards were 90s, but the first two obviously were like the really good ones anyway, so I'd count those. House as well.
Yeah, the It mini series was 1990, so just missed the cut-off point for that.
Yeah. Well, the House movies. Well, I think the first two at the very least were 80s. Again, Arrow Video have done a good review of those. How would you describe those?
Well, again, it's kind of like Critters or like Gremlins or so. They kind of like just stand on that kind of precipice of like not quite being horror, but being horror, if you get me. I think that was definitely like something I kind of think of a lot of 80s films. They were like, it's why I like that era of like horror films, like 80s and 90s, over like modern day stuff like The Ring or fucking Hostel and stuff. It's like, they're good for what they are, but I kind of like that more, I don't know, kind of like silly and over the top sort of thing they used to do back then.
And the House films were kind of anthology as well, weren't they? Each one was a separate story. One and four supposed to be connected, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's like the same actor and the same name, but it's clearly different characters. It's like, why?
There's Return of the Living Dead as well, 1 and 2, and that's kind of a connection to the George Romero films, because I think it was like the producer or something that had like co-ownership of the franchise, if you want to call it that. So that was why Dawn of the Dead wasn't Dawn of the Living Dead. The Living Dead thing was kept by this other guy, and the Of the Dead was George Romero. So they kind of went off in different directions. So there were those. There was also Zombie Nosh. You haven't watched that. I reviewed that last year on the channel myself.
Yeah, it's like, didn't you what you're saying? It was like actually like surprisingly decent for the title.
For what it was, yeah, it was like a big titty romp, like really cheaply made film, directed by Bill Heinzman, who was the original like main ghoul in Night of the Living Dead, kind of playing the same characters again. It's kind of got connective tissue to the George Romero zombie films. Which I only knew like recently, because for years, like back in the late 90s, we were going to like rent it, weren't we? And we just kind of laughed at it to the point where we just didn't actually rent it because it looked so bad. We kind of joke about it.
I mean, in fairness to us, there are a lot of films that are like vaguely connected to stuff like that, which are absolutely awful.
Yeah.
Because they had this horrible like habit, like Cinemassacre talk about it quite a bit, of like, we've got this weird unconnected film, so we're going to like title it like, you know, Zombie 5 or something like that.
2. It was Alien 2, wasn't it?
Like all these alternate titles, and it's like, okay, this is clearly something else. You just slapped this on to make it like a sequel to this other sequel, which was an unofficial sequel to like Night of the Living Dead or something like that.
Chronologically confusing, that's kind of phrase that he uses. There were some like pretty bad sequels to good films that came in earlier decades. So obviously like Jaws, some of the sequels there were, I mean, I'll still watch them. They're not terrible, but they're not good. So there was also, I haven't seen them, but the Psycho sequels, weren't they 80s as well? To Alfred Hitchcock's 60s film, Psycho.
Could be.
I've got Psycho 2, that's another Arrow one, I just don't get around to watching it. I've heard, I think it was Lee Lambert was saying that they're pretty good, or at least the second one is pretty good, I seem to remember him saying. That was Lee Lambert, not the Topher, that was his alter ego. So yeah, I think we're kind of running out of stuff, to be fair.
I think at this point we are just like listing like everything that came out in 1980, which well, the 1980s, to be clear.
But it was a good era as well for like the special effects side of things as well, because it was before like CGI became like a massive thing, or if there was CGI by then, it was very limited in what it could do. It was something where like creativity was a lot more apparent in it as well. So definitely a kind of golden era for it. I would mention as well, you see that shelf there where the George Romero thing is, just get the DVD, the Blu-ray off the end of the shelf. Yeah, that one. There's a pretty good documentary called In Search of Darkness. It's about 4.5 hours. I got the Dead Meat Collector's Edition, so the covers vary, but it's 4.5 hours. It's kind of like, just imagine watching a load of YouTube videos that are really professionally done, unlike ours. All in kind of one sitting, and that's what you get here. And it's really good, and it's got a lot of interviews from like some of the people who are behind it, like the top people, like John Carpenter and a load of others. And I think they only might have some, not Wes Craven because he's passed away, but I seem to remember seeing him interviewed in something. I don't think it was this, but they're actually doing a second one as well, which I've put money towards getting the Blu-ray of this. But you can view it online anyway, I believe, the first part anyway. and there's a second one that's coming out shortly. So you haven't, I don't think you've seen this, have you?
No, but I'm well aware of it. It's one of those things that gets advertised quite a bit on various like video review channels and stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, it's really good. I recommend watching it anyway. So I don't think there's anything else anyway. So we'll pretty much tie this up. So
yeah, have a happy Halloween.
Maybe next year we might do a 90s one possibly, because somebody was suggesting talking about In the Mouth of Madness, so that could tie in with like a 90s look at things.
Well, Buff was certainly mad when he got in his mouth.
Is there anything else we need to throw in there?
I don't think I've called you a bastard recently, so you're a bastard.
Oh yeah, of course, that's tradition on the channel.
He's a bastard.
So yeah, but yes, stay for the end afterwards, Buff. If you're watching this, I'm going to put some kind of taunt video on there. But yeah, I think we'll pretty much leave it there. Obviously, we've not done a video in here for a while, since like last December, I think. So.
Yeah, well, social distancing. We're getting this in before they start with like, right, we're locking everything down again.
Yeah.
You can't associate with anybody.
Well, yeah, some people you'd rather not associate with, to be fair. But
true.
It can be a double-edged sword. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. So, yeah, we'll cut this short and just say, anyone watching this the night this goes out, have a happy Halloween and do have nightmares. Oh, I was going to end it on that, but now we have to press stop now, so I look like a fool. Bye. Right then, just a quick reminder that you can follow us on social media. Obviously the channel exists on YouTube, we've been going strong since 2013, but we also have presence on Facebook as well, where we occasionally post updates and news on there. We also have Instagram, we don't really use it quite as much, but you can always follow us there if you're desperate. But beyond that, Brand X reviews, news reviews and retrospectives coming out of the UK.
Bloody hell, Torfer. What the hell's bloody Torfer been doing?
Look at that, that's meant for us.
I think you'll find it was meant for the boat.